Good evening. I'm Giulio Recchioni, Cultural Director at the Italian Cultural Center. And today I have the pleasure to be with Sergio Basso, Director of Sarita, who is featured as an Italian movie for the Vancouver International Film Festival 2020. Sergio, welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure, sheer pleasure to be here with you.
Let's talk about your movie, Sarita. It's a movie set in Nepal. What's the story behind the movie? When did your project start?
Well, it started many years ago in 2008. I was working with the International Civil Service, the Italian branch, and they proposed me to go and visit this camp to have a video making workshop with the local teenagers. I didn't know anything about the issue of the Bhutanese refugees stranded in Nepal, and that was the first thing that struck my attention. And I was very lucky because in Nepal, the local president of the International Civil Service is a great photographer, President Sestra, that became a great friend over time. So he accompanied me to the refugee camp. We lived there for 1 month in 2008, and from that moment on, I went back every year and a half, couple of years, to stay with the refugees, build up a relationship and mutual confidence, and to find a way to tell their odyssey and their fate too, their progressive resettlement from the refugee camp to all over the world. Canada is one of the countries concerned by this resettlement process, by the way.
No, I didn't know we were involved in this. Okay, wonderful. What are the messages, the social and historical messages, the most important ones that you think that you wanted to put inside the movie?
That's a huge question. Let's say, well, one of the major issues and one of the major messages related to it is identity. What are we? What are we made of? What defines us in the present, in the past, in the future? Where do you come from, and where are we going as a national, ethnic identity? And I think this can be a universal message. It's funny because I think that, and we were talking about this, a very strong difference between Canada and old Europe from this point of view. In Europe, we surmise we have a pre-built identity before meeting our neighbor. Immigrants come into our nations to work with us. On the contrary, Canada has a very open flexibility towards the immigrants. There is a so-called, let's call it social contract. And the main request is, insofar as we have a common language and you're ready to learn either English or French, and you want to build up the country with me, and you're going to be supportive for the community, you're more than welcome. And I'm very happy to know something more about your background, even the issues you must have passed through to arrive here as a refugee, for example, as an immigrant. And I find it fascinating, but unfortunately, it's not universal, and it's not the upper hand in the world nowadays. So I was fascinated by the opportunity of investigating this facet. Talking with the refugees about how they envisage their future in the resettlement. So they had been living sometimes for 30 years in the refugee camp, when finally the UN process allowed them to be resettled in Norway, for example. And try and imagine you are a 45-year-old Bhutanese refugee. You were born in Bhutan. You still remember the pastures, the meadows, the mountains, the hills of your childhood. And you were trained actually to play with cows, fresh air, gaudy green scenery, right? And you are thrown into Northern Europe with a lot of facilities, the possibility of getting educated, maybe a higher income, okay? But it's a huge gap. And before you were a Bhutanese in Bhutan, then you were a refugee in an enclave territory. And then you'll be a refugee, a new citizen in an old society. A Bhutanese, sometimes Hindu, sometimes Christian, sometimes Buddhist, in a Christian society. So how are you going to deal with all those issues? It's not going to be easy. And many teenagers or many many children are going to be totally Norwayified, Norwegian-fied very fast. And it's a normal dance. It's what I call the dance of cultures. It's a normal twist in one's life, but it entails the annihilation of the Bhutanese background in a couple of generations. So how are we supposed to deal with that? Why can't we find a political solution to that? So the film has to do with the Bhutanese issue. I mean, it starts from a Bhutanese refugee camp for one side, but it's actually a sort of litmus paper. It's meant to be a metaphor for all the refugee camps all over the world. Every time we have a political issue like that, how are you going to deal with it? And I'm not speaking about the practicalities. How are you going to solve it? How are you going to move thousands of people from an A place to a B place? No, I'm speaking about why are we going to help them? I mean, in which direction? What's our definition of their identity? That's a really not thorny, not tricky, tough issue.
Wow, yeah. And it's a very modern issue. For example, here in Canada, we had the arrival of many refugees from Syria. I was wondering, have you met the Bhutanese that have been transferred or in Norway?
In Toronto, in Norway, and in Italy, because they manage from Norway or Denmark to come to Italy, so we could meet. Yeah, and I'm in touch. I'm in contact thanks to the social media. So through Facebook Messenger, I've followed the development of the lives of many of them once resettled.
What's the overwhelming feeling of people that have been kind of saved, but at the same time misplaced in a country that is so far away from what they know and from what their reality was? For example, here in Canada, I believe there's an overwhelming sense of thankfulness for example, the Syrians that that arrived here. But is it the same for the
yes,
people?
Yes, of course. I think it depends on the age of the refugees we're speaking about. There is a sort of polarization in the society, in the micro community. So older people will fight, will strive to get integrated. Younger people will accelerate their integration through language, schooling, sometimes even accepting jobs that traditionally are involved with integration, like the military career.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You've been working with these people, not only describing their what happened to them historically, but also working with them to the point that many of them were stars, were acting in your movie, despite not being professional actors. How was working with them, and how come did you choose to go that route?
Well, it's wonderful. It's amazing, and I envisage this film and many films I've done as a sort of journal intime, a diary of my relationship with the character I have in front of the camera. So I worked with them for 10 years. I think it's kind of normal that I've built a mutual confidence with a lot of them. They know they can trust me. So it's easier to work together in front of the camera, and it's easier for them to forget that we are a crew, a cinematographical crew. So they act very, very naturally thanks to this process. Of course, it took quite a while to build the. So you prepare the bonfire, you prepare the wood, and then once you've lit it, it's fire and it's a lot of energy. It takes a while. It's just like gardening. I hate gardening. That's why I just like fishing. You have to wait, and so I hate both fishing and gardening. That's why I'm a movie director. I mean, it was the third in order of choice. No, aside from jokes, the thing went like this. I was working with them. I was shooting them. I was teaching them how to use the video camera. It was the first summer I spent with them. And then I went back to Italy, and I had a lot of hours of recording, of interviews, impressions, sceneries. And then I said to myself and to my collaborators, my usual editor, my creative producer, actually even the music composer I usually work with, we were brainstorming. I was like, how are we supposed to tell of the story, their odyssey. I don't want to shoot a tragic documentary. I mean, the story is already tragic per se in itself. So we must find something, a lever fork for for the story. And then 2 years later, I was in Nepal again in the refugee camp, and I was following some teenagers preparing for a Shiva festival. And they were rehearsing some Bollywood-like moves and some Lochampa moves. So they themselves were hybridizing their traditional dance moves plus Bollywood film moves, Bollywood genre they were exposed to. And I said to myself, that's a direction, that's a solution. It's natural, it's co-natural to them. So I'm not going to force them. I'm supposed to listen to them and to absorb their energy and reorganize their moves and dances. And that's exactly what we did. So I went back to the refugee camp with an ethnomusicologist, Lochan Rijal, and he's a great friend. And it's a wonderful story because, I mean, wonderful narrative arc his life, because he was a previous rock star in Nepal. Like he was the to mention an Italian rock star, he was the Nepalese Vasco Rossi. So when I arrived with him, I didn't know anything. I mean, I knew about it, but I didn't feel it so strongly, so warmly. So when we arrived at the refugee camp on a motorbike with mics and all the recording material, because our plan was to record the Lochampa, the refugee songs, and then to record the dances. Well, first of all, we didn't realize that we were doing something very important for the refugees themselves, because nobody earlier had ever fancied about recording their music heritage, or their lullabies, child songs, whatever. Secondly, Lochan Rijal, from his career as a rock star, decided to turn to a scholar in folk musicology, thanks to the meeting with a German scholar, a German drummer. So they created a wonderful department of folk music in a previous temple, not far from Kudanabari. So, well, we arrived on this motorbike 14 hours later from the temple at the refugee camp, and everybody recognized Lochan. Oh my God, who have you brought? And it was like, who are you? I mean, I've seen your tapes and you do great stuff. I didn't expect him to be so successful. So that was a problem. It was very fun. It was very funny. We had a wonderful time. We recorded 100 hours of music. And once back to Italy, Pivio and Aldo Descalzi Pivio and Aldo Descalzi, two music composers with whom I usually work, re-listened to all this material, reorganized it, and rearranged it, creating even original compositions. And as lyrics of the songs, we used the words of the interviews of the refugees. So once back to the refugee camp, I just had to teach the refugees their own words. They had to sing what they had said with music that was totally natural for them. So they were elated about the process.
Wonderful. And I'm glad you talked about music, because this movie, it's a bit of a cross genre between a documentary, an educational movie, an historical movie, a musical. And that seems to be some sort of trait for your art. How come you like to mix things up a little bit?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your words. I'm touched. Well, yeah, I think it corresponds to the way I perceive reality, and I want to kind of convey this perception, kind of render it back to the community. I think reality is complex, multi-layered. We are usually taught we should simplify it, and I don't understand why. We have all the means to understand complicated and complex stuff. We should train in that direction, because it's the only way we are going to be able to respect our neighbor. Our neighbor is complex. It doesn't reduce to our expectations. So I try to. The reason why I hybridize genres is because I try to render this into a film.
Wonderful. And you recently arrived from Italy to Vancouver.
Yeah.
How was your first impression of Vancouver?
First of all, no, I love it. I love it. No, I'm laughing because for the present situation, of course, I had to quarantine
Oh
first.
yeah, of course.
But I relocated actually because I'm gonna live here for at least 1 year with my cat, who is a member of the family. So she was very happy because she was actually allowed to get out, the little bastard. So in my neighborhood in Vancouver, generally there is a lot of green. So on the first day I freaked out, and I'm, oh my gosh, I mean, I couldn't stop her. And is she going to be? She's 18. Is she going to be back? Is she going to be able to orient herself? She's like, I don't know. After a couple of hours, she was back because she was hungry. So yeah. No, aside from jokes, I have already some friends here in Vancouver, and I'm really lucky. I've developed new friends pretty fast, and they have helped me a lot in orienting myself and feeling at home. So, for example, little but not insignificant anecdotes. On my very first day, as I arrived, some friends brought me groceries. I mean, I didn't even ask for that, but they thought that I might have problems in shopping online and stuff. First day. They knocked on my door, leaving the stuff, and that's the way we introduced to each other. And as soon as I finished my quarantine, all my friends offered for an escapade, for a trip out. So I went hiking, I went to swimming, I adored English Bay, Capilano Dam.
Yeah.
Wonderful, guys. I think Vancouver offers wonderful sceneries. I mean, I'm amazed. I'm really amazed, baffled.
Well, so in your career, you have directed a few documentaries and a few movies, not documentaries. Which ones do you prefer and why?
You're asking me a very difficult, if not terrible question. Terrible questions. Terrible in the meaning of really tough. I guess different genres pander to different moments of my life. So I've been devoting a long time to documentaries, and I feel like it's time for me now to veer to more fictional stuff. So I'm writing my second feature film, and I'm not denying that I might go back to documentaries in some years. I need to refresh a little bit, even because I like, as you underlined, mixing genres, mixing languages. In order to do so, for example, I'm co-writing a video game now for a Canadian publisher, by the way, for PS5 next year. It will be issued next year. Yep. So web art, theater, video game, cross-media platforms, everything can converge to storytelling. The most important thing is, I guess, we should never miss the heart, the core of our emotions and of the emotions we want to convey. So more fiction now in the following years, and then back to documentaries soon.
Oh, wonderful. Do you have a crew that always works with you for the documentaries and a crew that works with you for movies, or you just...
I have some collaborators I often work with. The music composer, my creative producer, music composer, they're amazing artists, Pivio and Aldo Descalzi. I've been working a lot with Alessandro Borrelli, a creative producer of 2 films of mine. There are DOPs I adore to work with, but in this specific case, the mix was great because the crew was local, actually, for both logistical and bureaucratic reasons. The film was a German-Italian co-production with a strong Nepali support. I was supposed to use basically almost only Nepali crew. So I had an assistant. Well, I mumbled some Nepali for survival, but I have a wonderful assistant that translated me simultaneously. She has been translating me for weeks on end. She freaked out. No, it's been a wonderful relationship. And the director of photography was Nepalese with a Nepalese crew. They did an amazing job. And the the number of problems, of issues we had to overcome is unsuspectable. When you see the movie, for example, you can't even imagine that we didn't even have electricity. We didn't have access to mains, so we had to produce it with the generator aside, distant enough not to have back noise. Okay, recharging the batteries was an issue. Getting prepared was an issue. I mean, so having a cinematographical crew in a refugee camp is not easy stuff. Mm-hmm. The spectator might take it for granted because hopefully the film flows. But we fought a lot with this, and I must thank my crew, my Nepalese crew, and it was a wonderful journey together, even to get acquainted. Well, I think the advantage of our job is that the film grammar and the set grammar, the language and the organization of our jobs on a set is the same all over the world. So it's very easy to get attuned to each other, to one another, because we shoot films, we shoot movies in the same way in Greenland, in Australia, in Africa. So it's very easy to understand each other. And that creates a very strong and very deep complicity very fast. Filming together is a way of creating new friends, new, very deep friends. So it was a wonderful opportunity of making friends with all the Nepalese crew. The only other Italian was the choreographer. And I was very lucky. The choreographer, his name is Matteo Gastaldo. Matteo is the European choreographer for such Broadway hits as Madagascar and Priscilla. So when they come to Italy, the Italian version is due to Matteo. And he had the guts to come with me. This guy, a top-notch professional, had the guts to come with me to the refugee camp and sweat his blood out to coordinate the movements of the refugees, because those refugees are able to dance. They love to dance, but for the film, for the shooting, we had to kind of retrain them, rearrange their choreographies, and Matteo was great in doing that. Wonderful anecdotes. I remember once all the dancing group was late, and I remember that he kind of walkie-talkied me. Sergio, I'm sorry, we're late. I know that we are late. We've been waiting for you for 20 minutes, 30 minutes now. Yeah, but there's a cow stranded in the middle of the road, and the bus had to stop. We are just on the border of the refugee camp because they had to get out and train at the gym, and then we had to come back and dance in the river in order to avoid having them train in the riverbed. That would have been extremely tough for them, right? So on the way back, there is a cow stranded in the middle of the road. Okay, and just move the cow. We cannot. She's Holly here. But he was very patient. He didn't forget. I mean, he didn't tell me we can't. We are supposed to wait for her to be willing to move naturally out of the road, and 3 hours later we were ready to shoot. And that's just one, So we have legion of small, but they're not even problems. I think they are the texture our life is made up of. Our memories are made up of. So it's great stuff.
But we're very glad to have you here, and not only as a Vancouverite, but also as an Italian. You make us proud of our tradition and our heritage. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
And Sarita by Sergio Basso will be on show at Vancouver International Film Festival starting from September 24th. So make sure you don't miss it. Thank you again, Sergio, and we'll see you all.
You're welcome. And see you well in front of a movie screen or on streaming. Yeah. In front of the movie. Yeah.
Sarita, के भयो? मैले केही कुरा सम्झन सकेको छैन मम्मी. के थियो?
ऊ भुटानको राजा थिए.
ए उ नै हो हामीले देश निकाला गरेको.
हामी मध्ये धेरै जनाले भुटानी प्रहरीको ज्यादतीबाट हाम्रो श्रीमतीहरुको इज्जत जोगाउनलाई हामीले भुटान छाडेका हौं.
म आफ्नो घर र मेरो सम्पत्ति फिर्ता चाहन्छु.
मलाई रिसेटलमेन्ट अनफेयर लाग्छ
चुपलाई
तिमी त कति लकी रहेछौ